Hello, and welcome back to Spoken Sleep. I'm Chuku, and tonight we're meeting a man called Eddie Marwick. Eddie has driven the N12 Nightbus through the same city on the same route for the last 11 years. He knows every stop, every shortcut, every flickering street lamp that nobody has got around to fixing, and the foxes in the park who run the place after midnight like a small unregulated nightclub. He knows his passengers too, some of them by name, some of them only by their stop, all of them in his quiet, steady way, by the small things, the seat they always sit in, the bag they always carry, and the look in their eyes after a long shift. Tonight, two of them are getting on, a nurse and a wedding singer, and it's raining. So get comfortable. The bus is on its way. The depot is quiet at this time. Buses are already in, parked up in their long, neat rows. Headlights off, engines cooling. The cleaners have moved through and gone home. The vending machine in the driver's room is doing its small electrical hum to nobody. And outside, it's raining. The slow, patient kind of rain that has been going on for an hour and intends to be going on for another 2. Not heavy, just steady. Eddie comes through the side door at 10:20, the way he has come through the side door at 10:20 for the last 11 years. He nods at Brian on the gate. Brian nods back. They do this every night, and have done this every night since 2014. And they have probably exchanged about 46 words in total in that time. All of them about the weather. Tonight Brian says, "It's wet," and Eddie says, "It is." And that's it. That's the conversation. Both men consider it a satisfactory exchange. Eddie pulls his coat collar up and walks across the yard, toward bus N12. The rain making small soft sounds on the shoulders of his coat. She is parked in her usual spot. She is the oldest bus in the fleet, and possibly the oldest bus still in regular service in the entire city. And she has a small persistent rattle in the dashboard that nobody has ever been able to find. Eddie has stopped pointing it out. He's grown rather fond of it. Anyway, he calls her Norma. Nobody else does. He climbs in. The doors give their usual sigh. He sets his bag down on the seat behind him. A battered canvas thing with a flask in one pocket and a paperback in the other. And he settles into the driver's seat, the way a man settles into a chair that he has been sitting in for a long time. Tartan flask. Pours half a cup. Steam. He holds the cup in both hands for a moment, just to feel it. He pulls out the paperback. The Wind in the Willows. Absolutely battered. The spine cracked in 3 places. He's read it about 30 times, and he keeps it on the dash because he likes knowing it's there. Sometimes, on the slow stretch over the bridge, he reads 2 pages. Tonight he just looks at it, smiles, and puts it down. He flips down the visor. A small framed photograph is tucked behind it. Black and white. A woman, smiling at whoever was holding the camera in 1986. Eddie nods at her. Small. Quiet. Not a thing he makes a thing of. He flips the visor back up. Engine on. The rain is on the windscreen now. Small, loose threads of it, running diagonally down the glass. The wipers go on. A single slow sweep. And Eddie watches the drops gather and then run. The first bit of Eddie's shift is always the same. Out of the depot, right at the lights, down the long stretch of empty industrial road, where the streetlights are too far apart, and the only other traffic is the occasional taxi heading the other way. Norma rolls forward steadily, comfortably, like an old horse who knows the field. The city is slowing down. The high-up office windows are going dark one by one. The takeaway places pulling their shutters. The pubs spilling out their last few stragglers. The pavements are dark and shining. The rain is keeping its steady pace. Every shop window is doubled in the wet, and the takeaway signs leave long blurred ribbons of red and yellow on the road behind them. Eddie likes this part of the night the most. The handover. When the city stops being for working in and starts being for sleeping in. He's never said this out loud to anyone. He wouldn't quite know how to put it, but he knows it. He passes the old church on Beaumont Road, the one with the clock that's been wrong since 1998. Eddie doesn't even check it anymore. He uses the pub instead. When the lights go out at the Crown, it's 10:30, every night. As regular as the tide. Tonight the lights at the Crown are out. 10:30. Right on time. Eddie nods to no one in particular and turns left toward the hospital. The N12 makes 8 stops on its way out of the city, then turns around at the cemetery, then makes the same 8 stops back, 3 full loops a night. Brian on the gate has worked out, once on a slow afternoon, that Eddie has driven the route somewhere in the region of 9,000 times. Eddie thought about this for a while, and then he said, "Nah, that can't be right." And Brian said, "I checked twice." And that was that. The first stop after the depot is the hospital. St. Bridges, a great Victorian beast of a building. All red brick and leaded windows on the original wing, with a more sensible glass extension stuck to the side of it sometime in the 90s. The main entrance is closed at this hour. The night entrance is just round the side. A small set of automatic doors that hiss open and shut every few minutes as somebody arrives or somebody leaves. Eddie pulls Norma up to the stop, hisses the brakes, opens the doors. He doesn't always get a passenger here. Some nights he sits at the stop for a timetabled minute, watches the night doors do their slow open and shut, and pulls away again with an empty bus. But tonight he does. He can see her already, coming down the steps from the night entrance. Bag slung over one shoulder, the small reflective strip on her sleeve catching Norma's headlights as she walks. She's got her hood up, not in a hurry. The rain doesn't bother her. She's been on her feet far too long today to notice the weather. Maya. Eddie has been picking Maya up from this stop, now and then for about 4 years. Not every night, not even most nights, but often enough that he knows her face and her walk, and that she takes the third seat back on the left every single time without even thinking about it. He doesn't actually know her surname. He's not sure she knows his. He learned her first name by accident a while back, on a night when she got on with her badge still clipped to her scrubs. Maya, in small printed letters under the hospital crest. And he just quietly held onto it and used it the next time she stepped on. And she didn't mention that he'd never asked. And he didn't mention that he'd never been told. That's the kind of friendship it is. Built sideways, by small daily things. Not a friendship at all, by any normal measure. But something. Definitely something. She climbs aboard, taps her pass, pushes her hood back. A few drops of rain fall from it onto the floor. Evening. Evening, Maya. How's the world? You know, held together just. Good shift? Long one. She smiles when she says it. Eddie has known a lot of tired people in his life. Bus drivers mostly. And his wife when she came in from a long day at the school. And he has come to recognize the difference between tired and unhappy and tired and full. Maya is tired and full. There is a quiet glow about her that 12-hour A&E shifts have never quite managed to extinguish. And Eddie has often wondered, privately of course, where she keeps it stored. It must be somewhere very deep in. She makes her way down the bus. Third seat back on the left. She always sits in the third seat back on the left. Eddie has wondered about this too. But he's never asked, because some things are sacred, and a person's seat on the bus is one of them. Norma's doors hiss closed. Eddie pulls away from the curb. Norma rolls back into the road. The hospital recedes in the wing mirror. Its lit windows, its small fleet of parked ambulances, its single porter standing under the awning, having a smoke he probably shouldn't be having, watching the rain. The route from St. Bridges takes the bus down Beaumont Road, along the edges of the park, and onto the high street. Eddie takes it slowly. He always takes this stretch slowly. There's a row of speed bumps near the school that he could probably sail over if he wanted to. But Norma is old, and he is not in any hurry. And there's a passenger on board who's been on her feet since 11 o'clock this morning, and he sees no good reason to bounce her around. He glances in the mirror. Maya has already got her book out. He can't quite see what it is from here. But what he does know is that it'll be a paperback, and he knows the corner of the cover will be slightly bent from being shoved in and out of the side pocket of her bag for weeks. And he knows that she will be no more than 3 or 4 pages from the end of whatever it is. Maya is always nearly finished with her book, and she's always starting a new one within a day. He doesn't know how she does it. He's been on the same one for about 14 months. She turns a page. Eddie looks back at the road. The park goes past on the left, empty at this hour, except for the foxes, who have full ownership of the place between midnight and dawn, and run it like a small unregulated nightclub. Eddie has watched them for years. There's one big angry male, and a smaller one with a bent ear that he privately calls Trouble, and 3 younger ones that haven't earned names yet. Tonight the park is quiet. No foxes. Just a long row of street lamps making their pools of light on wet tarmac, and the railings, and the old gates that haven't been closed in 20 years because nobody can find the key. The rain has thinned a little, just enough to make the street lamps soft and haloed. Norma rumbles on past. Maya in the mirror has put her book down. She's looking out of the window now. Not at anything in particular. Just out. The kind of looking out that isn't really looking. It's the eyes resting somewhere outside the body for a minute, while the body has a quiet word with itself. Eddie has seen her do this before. He doesn't disturb it. In fact, he drives extra carefully, just for this moment. Outside, the rain is doing its quiet, patient work on the world. Streaks down the glass. Street lamps soft and haloed. What he doesn't know, what he could not possibly know, because she has never told anyone, and certainly not him, is that this stretch of route, this exact stretch between the park and the high street, is the bit where Maya does her thinking. The hospital is for doing. The flat is for sleeping. The bus is for thinking. She didn't mean for it to be that way. It just became that way. Slowly. Over 4 years. The way certain rooms in certain houses become the room where you cry, or the room where you take phone calls from your mother, without anyone having voted on it. The bus is the room between, and Eddie, without ever realizing it, is the man who keeps the room steady while she's in it. Tonight she's thinking about a patient, a man, 91, who came into A&E this afternoon with what they thought was another fool, and turned out to be something quieter and more final. He had been very calm about it. Maya had been with him for most of the afternoon, on and off, between other patients. And at one point, she had sat on the edge of his bed and asked him, gently, the way she has learned to ask these things, if there was anyone they should call. And he said yes, his daughter. She lived 2 hours away. He'd given Maya the number, and then Maya had called. Then she'd come back to sit with him while they waited. And he had said something to her. Not a big thing. Not the kind of thing he planned to say. Just something he said the way old people say things, when there is suddenly time for them to be said. He had told her that the trick of a long life, in the end, was not the things you'd done. It was the things you had stopped being annoyed about. The grudges you'd put down. The opinions you let go. The ways you had decided at some point to stop being right about everything. He said it lightly, not as advice, just as something he'd noticed. His daughter had arrived about an hour later. Maya had stepped out of the room and quietly pulled the curtains across. And she had heard, just before the curtains closed, the small soft sound of two people who had not seen each other in a very long time and were very glad they had now. That, she thought, that had been enough. Maya, on the bus, watches the wet tarmac slide past. It had not been a sad shift, exactly. He had had 91 years, and a daughter who had got there in time, and a ward of nurses who had been kind to him in the afternoon. That, by most measures, is a good day. But the thing he had said is sitting with her tonight. The things you had stopped being annoyed about. She turns away from the window. She picks up her book again. She finds her place. But she doesn't read. She just holds it open in her lap and lets the bus carry her. Eddie has noticed nothing of this. What he has noticed is that the high street is coming up, and that the lights at the chip shop are still on, though they shouldn't be, which means Tariq is doing his late night tidy. He'll pull Norma up at the high street stop in about a minute. There may be a passenger there. There may not. The night bus is a coin flip kind of business. He glances in the mirror one more time. Maya is backing her book. He smiles, very small to himself, and turns Norma onto the high street. The high street stop is just past the chip shop, opposite the bookmaker's that's been there since before Eddie was driving, and will probably still be there long after he's stopped. The chip shop lights are still on, glowing warmly through the wet window. Tariq is at the counter, wiping something down, doing his late tidy. Eddie's driven past him at this hour for as long as he can remember. Eddie pulls Norma in, hisses the brakes, opens the doors. There is one man waiting at the stop, sheltering under the small plexiglass roof of the bus shelter. Eddie sees him and smiles before he means to. Tony Devine, 63. A suit that was tailored when Margaret Thatcher was still in office and has been taken in twice since. Open collar, no tie. A small silver chain that's been there since he was 19. A flat cap, a guitar in a soft case, slung over one shoulder. A small leather hodel in his other hand, and the faintest after-trail of cologne. Proper cologne, not aftershave. Already drifting through Norma's open doors before Tony has even stepped on board. Tony Devine has just finished a wedding. Eddie can tell, the way Eddie can always tell with Tony. Tony is not tired. Tony is winding down. There is a particular look that performers have in the hour after a gig. A kind of soft afterglow. The engine is still running, but the foot is off the pedal. And Tony has it tonight. The way he has it most Saturday nights. The rain has caught the shoulders of his suit. On the short walk from the pub to the bus stop, he doesn't seem to mind. The shoulders of Tony's suit have absorbed worse than rain over the years. He climbs aboard, taps his pass. Evening, my friend. Evening, Tony. Good one tonight. Belter, mate. Bride's mother lost her mind during Lady in Red. Husband had to fetch her a chair. Strong work. Eddie, my son, I am a craftsman. He winks. Eddie laughs. A real one. Not the polite version. And Tony makes his way down the bus. He always sits halfway down on the right. Not the third seat. Not the fifth. Not in any rigid place. Tony is not a fixed seat man. No surprise there. But he always sits somewhere around the middle, on the right, where the light from the street lamps catch the window in the way that he likes. He sets the guitar carefully on the seat beside him, like a person or a lover. He puts the holder on the floor. He stretches both arms out along the tops of the seats, sits back, lets his head rest against the window, and exhales. A long, slow, satisfied exhale. The exhale of a man who has just spent 4 hours making strangers cry happy tears at a function room in a pub on the high street and is now finally allowed to stop. What Tony does not know, and what Eddie has never told him, and what Eddie will probably never tell him, is this. In 1989, late summer, possibly early autumn, Eddie can't quite remember which, Eddie's mate Peter got married in the function room above the Anchor, 2 streets back from where the bus is now. Eddie was 26. He'd been seeing a woman called Julie for about 4 months. They were at the stage of things where everything was still a little uncertain, where neither of them had quite said the big word yet, where each evening together still felt slightly like a gift that still might be taken back. Pete had hired a singer. Eddie had been 3 pints in. At a round table near the back, holding Julie's hand, under the tablecloth, in the slightly self-conscious way men do when they aren't quite sure if they're allowed to. The singer had got up, slightly too shiny suit, open collar shirt, a signet ring on his little finger, and he had introduced himself as Tony Divine, ladies and gentlemen, here for your dancing pleasure. And the room had clapped politely before they knew whether he was any good. Then he had started singing. And after about 8 bars in, Margaret had gone very quiet beside Eddie, in the way people do when something unexpected is happening to them. And her eyes had filled up. Just a little. Just enough. And Eddie had glanced at her and held her hand a bit tighter under the table and not said anything because he knew not to. The song had been Wonderful Tonight by the great Eric Clapton. Eddie has never been able to hear it the same way since. Tony is the same man. Eddie knew it within about 6 seconds of the first time he picked Tony up. Different cap, different decade, different weight on the bones, but the voice is the voice. And Eddie has been carrying the voice around his head for 36 years and has never ever said a word. What would he say? Excuse me, were you the singer at a wedding in 1989 in a function room above a pub I can't even fully remember the name of? Tony would probably politely try to remember. He'd probably get it. He'd done so many of those rooms. He'd say, "Yeah, mate, probably sounds about right," with the warmth of a man who has played 400 similar weddings. And the moment would be diminished by being said out loud. So instead, every time Tony gets on the N12, Eddie nods. And Tony says, "Evening, my friend." And Eddie says, "Evening, Tony." And somewhere quietly behind Eddie's ribs, there is a small warm pulse of "You sang on the night Margaret first cried in front of me." That's enough. That's plenty. Some things are bigger when nobody knows about them but you. Norma pulls away from the curb. The rain has picked up again. Small, steady taps on the roof. A soft hiss under the wheels. Tony in the mirror has settled in. His head is against the window. His eyes half closed. The street lamps from the high street going past in slow golden sweeps across his face. After a minute or so, very softly, he begins to hum. Eddie can't quite catch the song at first. Tony is humming it for himself, not for the bus, not for any audience. The voice is still warm from the gig, still loose, still pleased with itself. The hum is low and easy, and full of small unconscious flourishes, the kind of grace notes a singer puts in without noticing, because his voice has been doing them for 46 years. After a few bars, Eddie places it. "Fly me to the moon." Sinatra's version, the slow one. Eddie smiles to himself at the wheel. And Tony hums on. Up at the front of the bus, Maya has put her book down again. She's listening too. Not in any obvious way. Just sitting a little stiller than she had been. Head turned slightly toward the window. Eddie watches her in the mirror for a second and decides not to mention it. There is a man humming Sinatra at the back of his bus, and a tired nurse at the front of his bus, listening without quite admitting she's listening. And the rain is doing its slow, steady song on the roof, and the street lamps are doing their slow gold sweep. And the road ahead is empty for half a mile. This, Eddie thinks, is a very good shift. He turns Norma towards the bridge. The bridge is Eddie's favourite stretch of the route, about 3 minutes from one end to the other, if Norma is feeling herself, which tonight she is. And it crosses the river right at the point where the city stops trying so hard. The buildings on either bank thin out. The water is wide and slow and black, lit in stripes by the lamps along the rails. The rain has eased a little out over here, over the water. Norma rumbles steadily across, the wipers doing their slow, steady sweep. Tony in the mirror has stopped humming. His eyes are closed now. He hasn't quite fallen asleep. Tony never falls asleep on the bus. Eddie has noticed. He's a man who comes off a stage too wide to drop off properly until he's home and in his slippers. But he has gone somewhere quieter inside himself. Eddie leaves him to it. The bridge ends. The road dips left. They are on the long, quiet stretch of the terrace streets now. Rows of small houses with their lights mostly off. The occasional upstairs window glowing softly behind a curtain. Rain on the slate roofs. A dog barks somewhere 2 streets over, and immediately thinks better of it. Tony's stop is the last one before the estate. He's been getting off there for about 3 years. A small red brick block with a green door. 2nd floor, his flat. Eddie has never seen the inside of it, of course. He imagines it's full of records and a guitar stand or 2, and probably a very nice armchair, and a great kettle. He pulls Norma up, hisses the brakes, opens the doors. Tony stands, picks up the guitar, picks up the hodel, adjusts his cap. He pauses by the driver's seat on his way out. He always pauses, and tips his cap just an inch. Good night, Eddie, my son. Good night, Tony. Get some rest. On the list. He steps off into the rain. Norma's doors hiss closed behind him. Eddie watches him in the side mirror as he walks toward the green door. Guitar over the shoulder, slight roll in his walk. A man going home. Eddie sits for a second longer than he needs to before pulling away. Just a second. Long enough that if you were watching, you'd have noticed. But nobody is watching. Then he releases the brake, and Norma rolls into the dark. Maya at the front of the bus gets off 2 stops later. She gives Eddie a small tired smile on her way out. Night, Eddie. Night, Maya. Take care. She nods, pulls her hood up against the rain, and steps down onto the curb. She disappears into the streetlight glow, and the door's closed. And now Norma is empty. She does the rest of the loop alone. The estate, the cemetery turn, back the way she came. 2 more loops to do tonight, before the depot. But those are stories for another evening. Other passengers will get on. Other small lives will pass through her old velvet seats. Tonight Eddie has a tartan flask, still half full, and a paperback he's not going to read, and a small framed photograph behind the visor that he might give a second nod to before the night is out. The street lamps slide past. The rain keeps its steady song. The dashboard rattle, reminding Eddie it's still there, as if Eddie could ever forget. Eddie smiles, very small, just to himself and the rain. And he drives on.